The rain poured down in sheets, drumming relentlessly against the metal roof of the Hollow Creek police station. The station, a squat, brick building with peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights, stood at the edge of town like a forgotten relic. Inside, the dimly lit corridors echoed with the sound of footsteps and the distant murmur of voices, creating an eerie atmosphere that clung to the air like a dense fog. Officer Sarah Reed sat at her desk, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. The late-night shift was usually quiet, a time for paperwork and the occasional drunk driver. But tonight, there was an unsettling tension in the air, something that made her skin crawl. She glanced at the clock on the wall 3:07 a.m. The hour when the world seemed to stand still, caught between night and dawn, when the shadows seemed to grow longer and the silence more oppressive. As she sipped her lukewarm coffee, the radio crackled to life, startling her from her thoughts. "Dispatch to Hollow Creek Station, do you copy?" The voice was sharp, urgent, cutting through the stillness like a knife. Sarah grabbed the radio, her heart skipping a beat. "This is Officer Reed, go ahead." "Reed, we've got a 10-31 at the old Peterson house on Willow Lane. Neighbors reported seeing lights inside, but the place has been abandoned for years. Can you check it out?" Sarah hesitated. The Peterson house had a dark reputation in Hollow Creek, a place whispered about in hushed tones. Rumors of strange occurrences, mysterious deaths, and the occasional daredevil teen who claimed to have seen something inside. But it was just a house, an old, crumbling building that had seen better days. Nothing more, she told herself. "Copy that," Sarah replied, trying to keep the unease out of her voice. She grabbed her flashlight, holstered her gun, and headed for the door. The station was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that made her feel like she was being watched. She shook off the feeling and stepped out into the rain. The drive to Willow Lane was short, the streets deserted at this hour. The rain continued to fall in heavy sheets, turning the road slick and treacherous. As Sarah approached the Peterson house, a sense of dread settled in the pit of her stomach. The house loomed out of the darkness, its once grand facade now covered in ivy and decay. The windows were dark, save for a faint, flickering light that seemed to dance behind the tattered curtains. Sarah parked the cruiser and stepped out, the cold rain instantly soaking through her uniform. She shone her flashlight on the front door, which hung slightly ajar, swaying in the wind. She called out, "Hollow Creek Police. Anyone inside?" Her voice echoed off the walls of the house, but there was no response, only the sound of the rain and the creaking of the old wood. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The smell of damp and rot hit her like a wall as she stepped inside. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the house itself was breathing. The beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a long, narrow hallway lined with old, dusty furniture covered in white sheets. "Hello," she called again, her voice trembling slightly. Still no answer. As she ventured deeper into the house, the sense of being watched grew stronger. She felt eyes on her, cold and unblinking, but every time she turned around, there was nothing there, only shadows that seemed to move just out of the corner of her eye. The light she had seen from outside appeared to be coming from the living room. She approached cautiously, her hand resting on the grip of her gun. The room was large, with high ceilings and a grand fireplace that dominated one wall. The furniture was old, covered in a thick layer of dust, as if no one had set foot in the room for years. But on the coffee table in the center of the room, a single candle burned, its flame flickering weakly in the draft. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There was no way that candle had been burning for years. Someone had been here, maybe still was. She scanned the room, her flashlight casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. But the room was empty. Just as she was about to call in her findings, something caught her eye, a figure standing in the doorway on the other side of the room. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure was tall, dressed in black, with its face obscured by shadow. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, watching her. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking. She reached for her gun, but before she could draw it, the figure vanished. One moment it was there, the next, it was gone, as if it had melted into the shadows. Sarah's hands trembled as she backed away, her mind racing. She didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but there was something about this house, something that defied explanation. She needed to get out, needed to report what she had seen. But as she turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping her inside. Panic surged through her as she ran to the door, yanking on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. She was trapped. The house groaned around her, the walls closing in as the darkness seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. She could hear whispers now, faint and indistinct, like voices carried on the wind, but there was no one there. The shadows moved, swirling around her, drawing closer. Sarah's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into complete darkness. She fumbled for her radio, her fingers numb with fear, but when she tried to call for help, all she heard was static. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling her ears with a cacophony of voices that seemed to be coming from inside her own head. She stumbled backward, her back hitting the wall as she tried to make sense of what was happening. But there was no sense to be made, only fear, cold and all-consuming. The shadows moved in closer, and in the darkness, she saw them figures, dozens of them, their faces twisted in expressions of pain and despair. They reached out to her, their fingers cold and clammy as they brushed against her skin. Sarah screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. The figures closed in, their whispers turning into a deafening roar. She could feel them pulling at her, dragging her down into the darkness, into the house itself. And then, everything went silent. The next morning, when the day shift arrived at Hollow Creek Police Station, Officer Sarah Reed was nowhere to be found. Her cruiser was discovered parked outside the Peterson house, its engine cold and the doors locked. Inside the house, there was no sign of her, only the faint smell of burnt wax and the lingering sense of something malevolent, something that had claimed another victim. The Peterson house was sealed off, declared off limits to anyone in Hollow Creek. But the whispers continued, rumors of the house and what had happened there spreading like wildfire. Some said they could still see a light in the windows at night, a single candle burning in the darkness. Others claimed to hear whispers, faint and indistinct, carried on the wind whenever they passed by. But no one dared enter the house again. No one wanted to risk becoming another name on the growing list of those who had vanished within its walls, lost to the darkness that lurked inside. And so, the Peterson house remained, a silent sentinel at the edge of town, a place of fear and mystery, where the shadows moved on their own and the whispers never ceased.